A black woman with a degree? I'd like to see that.
A black woman with a degree. I'd like to see that, said the director, and he almost fainted at her response. Dr. Vanessa Johnson stood in the marble-floored lobby of prestigious preparatory academy, her PhD diploma carefully tucked inside her leather briefcase. She had arrived 15 minutes early for her interview as the new director of curriculum, a position she was overqualified for but desperately needed to support her family after her husband's unexpected death. The receptionist, a young blonde woman named Ashley, looked up from her computer with barely concealed surprise. "Are you here for the janitorial position?" she asked, gesturing toward a side door. "The service entrance is around back." Vanessa smiled politely, though she felt the familiar sting of assumption based on appearance. "Actually, I'm here for the Director of Curriculum interview with Mr. Richardson. I'm Dr. Vanessa Johnson." Ashley's eyebrows shot up as she scrambled to check her appointment book. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, let me call Mr. Richardson's office." As Vanessa waited, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. At 38 years old, she held a PhD in educational psychology from Harvard, had published groundbreaking research on learning methodologies, and had transformed 3 struggling school districts during her 15-year career. But none of that seemed to matter when people saw her dark skin and made their assumptions. This is the story of how Dr. Vanessa Johnson faced the most humiliating professional experience of her life and turned it into a moment that would forever change not just her own trajectory, but the lives of thousands of students who needed someone to believe in their potential. If you value real stories of resilience and want to be part of a community that believes in the power of overcoming adversity, subscribe to the Resilience channel. Here, every story is a testament that it's possible to conquer any obstacle. Vanessa had grown up in Oakland, California, the daughter of a seamstress and a factory worker who had immigrated from Jamaica in the 1970s. Her parents, Claudette and Winston Johnson, had sacrificed everything to give their 3 children opportunities they never had. Education was sacred in the Johnson household, and failure was not an option. From kindergarten through high school, Vanessa had been the student that teachers remembered long after graduation. She devoured books, asked probing questions, and helped struggling classmates master difficult concepts. Her natural ability to explain complex ideas in simple terms caught the attention of Mrs. Garcia, her high school psychology teacher, who became her first real mentor. Vanessa, Mrs. Garcia had said during their senior year, "You have a gift for understanding how people learn. You should consider education as a career, but not just teaching. You should think about how to change entire systems." Those words planted a seed that would grow throughout Vanessa's college years at UC Berkeley, where she studied psychology and education. She graduated summa cum laude and was accepted into Harvard's prestigious doctoral program in educational psychology with a full fellowship. Graduate school at Harvard was both exhilarating and isolating. Vanessa was one of only 3 black students in her program, and often the only person of color in her advanced seminars. Some professors seemed surprised by her insights, as if intelligence from someone who looked like her was unexpected. Classmates occasionally suggested that her admission was due to affirmative action rather than merit, despite her academic record speaking for itself. But Vanessa had learned early not to let others' perceptions define her reality. She threw herself into her research, focusing on how socioeconomic factors and cultural backgrounds affected learning outcomes. Her dissertation, titled "Breaking Barriers: Cultural Responsive Teaching in High-Poverty Schools," challenged traditional educational approaches and provided evidence-based strategies for improving outcomes for underserved students. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, her dissertation advisor, recognized Vanessa's exceptional work and encouraged her to pursue publication immediately. "This research could revolutionize how we approach education in urban districts," she told Vanessa. Although you're not just earning a PhD, you're going to change lives. After graduating with honors from Harvard, Vanessa returned to California with a mission. She accepted a position as Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum in Richmond, a district struggling with low test scores, high dropout rates, and a reputation for failure. The school board had hired her specifically because of her research and her understanding of the challenges facing their predominantly minority student population. Within 2 years, Vanessa had implemented innovative teaching strategies that increased standardized test scores by 30% and reduced the dropout rate by half. She developed professional development programs that helped teachers connect with students from different cultural backgrounds and created mentorship initiatives that paired high school students with community leaders. Her success in Richmond led to offers from larger districts. She spent the next decade moving from one challenging assignment to another, always accepting positions in places where other administrators had failed. Each time, she brought her research-based approach and her deep understanding of how to motivate both students and teachers. In Sacramento, she transformed a district that had been threatened with state takeover. In Fresno, she increased college enrollment rates among Latino students by 40%. In San Jose, she designed a bilingual education program that became a model for the entire state. Throughout her career, Vanessa published over 30 peer-reviewed articles and became a sought-after speaker at educational conferences. Despite her professional success, Vanessa's personal life was anchored by her marriage to David Johnson, a civil rights attorney she had met during her graduate studies. They had 2 children together, Marcus and Zoe, and had built a comfortable life in Palo Alto where David's law practice was thriving. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in March when David collapsed in his office from a massive heart attack. At 42 years old, he was gone before the paramedics arrived, leaving Vanessa to raise their 2 children alone while dealing with overwhelming grief and unexpected financial pressures. David's law practice had been their primary source of income, and his sudden death left Vanessa with mortgage payments, private school tuition for the children, and medical bills that insurance didn't cover. For the first time in her adult life, she needed a job not just for professional fulfillment, but for basic survival. The position at prestigious preparatory academy had seemed like an answer to her prayers. The salary was substantial, the benefits were excellent, and the location would allow her children to remain in their current schools. The academy served the children of Silicon Valley executives and celebrities with a reputation for academic excellence and college placement rates that made headlines. When Vanessa researched the school, she learned that they were struggling with their first significant challenges in decades. State education requirements were changing, and their traditional teaching methods were no longer meeting new standards. They needed someone with expertise in curriculum development and assessment, someone who could maintain their elite reputation while adapting to modern educational demands. Vanessa's credentials were perfect for the position. Her Harvard PhD, her track record of district transformation, her published research, and her understanding of both traditional and innovative educational approaches made her the ideal candidate. She had submitted her application with confidence, knowing that her qualifications exceeded the job requirements. The interview had been scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. As Vanessa sat in the lobby waiting to be called, she observed the environment around her. The school's wealth was evident in every detail, from the imported marble floors to the original artwork hanging on the walls. Students moved through the corridors in crisp uniforms, their conversations peppered with discussions about SAT prep and Ivy League applications. Dr. Johnson, a tall, impeccably dressed man in his 50s, approached the reception desk. "I'm Principal Richardson. Thank you for coming in today." James Richardson was exactly what Vanessa had expected from his photo on the school's website. White, distinguished, with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege and authority. He led her through corridors, lined with photographs of graduating classes, pointing out famous alumni and emphasizing the school's prestigious history. "As you can see," he said as they walked, "we have very high standards at prestigious prep. Our families expect excellence, and we deliver it. The question is whether we can maintain that excellence while adapting to these new state requirements that frankly seem designed for less rigorous institutions." They arrived at a conference room, where two other administrators were waiting. Richardson introduced them as Dr. Margaret Whitfield, the academic dean, and Mr. Charles Hampton, the assistant principal. Both were white, both appeared to be in their 50s, and both looked at Vanessa with the kind of polite but skeptical expression she had encountered many times throughout her career. "Please, have a seat," Richardson said, gesturing to a chair across from the three administrators. "We've reviewed your application, and we have to say, it's quite impressive. Almost too impressive, if you know what I mean." Vanessa settled into her chair, her briefcase at her feet, and smiled professionally. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by too impressive, Mr. Richardson." Dr. Whitfield leaned forward, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Well, Dr. Johnson, your resume shows experience primarily in urban districts with disadvantaged populations. Our students come from very different backgrounds. They're high achievers from educated families. The challenges you've faced in your previous positions simply don't apply here." "I see," Vanessa replied calmly. "And what specific concerns do you have about my ability to work with high-achieving students?" Mr. Hampton shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not about your ability, per se. It's about fit. Our families are very particular about who they entrust with their children's education. They expect their administrators to understand their values and their expectations." Vanessa felt the familiar tension building in her chest, the recognition of coded language that she had encountered throughout her career. She kept her expression neutral as she responded. "Could you be more specific about what values and expectations you're referring to?" Richardson cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair. "Dr. Johnson, let me be frank with you. This is a very traditional institution. Our families value tradition, excellence, and proven approaches to education. Your background is certainly interesting, but we need someone who understands our culture. I have 15 years of experience in educational leadership," Vanessa said, her voice remaining steady. "I've increased test scores, improved college placement rates, and developed innovative curricula that have been adopted by districts across the state. Could you help me understand what specific qualifications I'm missing?" Dr. Whitfield exchanged a glance with her colleagues before responding. "Dr. Johnson, your experience has been with students who needed motivation and support to achieve basic standards. Our students are already high achievers. They need someone who can challenge them at an elite level." The condescension in her tone was unmistakable, and Vanessa felt her professional composure being tested. "Dr. Whitfield, I'd like to understand your perspective better. Are you suggesting that working with underperforming students is somehow easier than working with high-achieving ones?" "Not easier," Hampton interjected quickly. "Just different. Very different." Richardson leaned forward, his expression growing more direct. "Look, Dr. Johnson, let me cut to the chase. We've had some concerns about your credentials. Your PhD is from Harvard, your publications are impressive, and your track record shows results. But to be honest, it seems almost too good to be true." Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face as she realized what he was implying. "I'm sorry. Are you questioning the authenticity of my credentials?" "Not questioning exactly," Richardson said, "but you have to understand our position. We've never had a candidate with your background apply for this level of position at our school. It's unusual." Dr. Whitfield nodded in agreement. "In our experience, people with your educational background typically pursue different career paths, urban education, community colleges, that sort of thing. A position at an elite preparatory academy is quite a leap. The room fell silent as the weight of their implications settled over the conversation. Vanessa looked at each of the three administrators, recognizing that this interview had taken a turn she had hoped never to experience again in her career. "Let me make sure I understand what you're saying," Vanessa said slowly. "You believe that my credentials are questionable because someone with my background doesn't typically achieve this level of education or professional success. Is that correct?" Richardson shifted uncomfortably. "Dr. Johnson, we're simply being thorough. In today's environment, we have to verify everything." "I see," Vanessa replied. "And have you requested verification of credentials from your other candidates?" The silence that followed answered her question clearly. Hampton tried to smooth over the awkwardness. "Dr. Johnson, perhaps we should focus on the practical aspects of the position. For example, how would you handle parents who question your decisions?" "Our families are very involved and very demanding." Vanessa recognized the subtext immediately. They were asking how she would handle racist parents who might object to a black woman in a position of authority over their children's education. "Mr. Hampton," she said, "I've worked with parents from all backgrounds throughout my career. I've found that when you demonstrate competence, communicate clearly, and show genuine care for their children's success, most parents are supportive, regardless of other factors." "But what about those who aren't?" Dr. Whitfield pressed. "What if a parent specifically requests that their child not be placed in programs that you've developed?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Vanessa realized that this interview had crossed a line from professional skepticism to something much more troubling. "Dr. Whitfield," Vanessa said, her voice growing firmer, "are you asking me how I would handle parents who object to my race?" Richardson quickly intervened. "Dr. Johnson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're simply trying to assess how you would fit into our school culture." "Your school culture," Vanessa repeated. "Denis, and what exactly defines that culture?" The three administrators exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Richardson spoke with the kind of bluntness that Vanessa suspected he rarely displayed so openly. "Dr. Johnson, let me be completely honest with you. Our school has a certain image to maintain. Our donors, our board members, our families, they have expectations about what leadership looks like at prestigious prep. Your qualifications are impressive, but we have to consider the bigger picture." The mask had finally slipped completely. Vanessa sat in stunned silence for a moment, processing the reality that these educated, professional administrators were openly discussing their reluctance to hire her because of her race. "Mr. Richardson," she said finally, "I want to make sure I understand what you're telling me. Are you saying that despite my qualifications, you have concerns about hiring me because of how your community might react to having a black woman in a leadership position?" Richardson's face flushed red. "Dr. Johnson, I think you're misinterpreting our concerns. This is about fit, about culture, about what, exactly?" Vanessa interrupted, her professional composure finally beginning to crack. "And about the fact that in your view, someone who looks like me couldn't possibly have earned a PhD from Harvard. About the assumption that my research and publications are somehow fraudulent. About your belief that black educators are only qualified to work in urban schools with struggling students." The room erupted in uncomfortable protests from all three administrators, each trying to explain that their concerns were purely professional and that race had nothing to do with their assessment. Vanessa stood up slowly, reaching for her briefcase. "Gentlemen, Dr. Whitfield, I think this interview has been quite illuminating. You've made your position very clear." "Dr. Johnson, please don't misunderstand," Hampton said desperately. "We're not saying you're not qualified. We're just saying that this particular position might not be the right fit." Vanessa paused at the door and turned back to face them. For a moment, she considered simply leaving with whatever dignity she could salvage. But then she thought about her children, about the students she had served throughout her career, and about every other qualified professional who had been dismissed because they didn't look like what these people expected leadership to look like. "Before I leave," she said, opening her briefcase, "I'd like to share something with you." She pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the conference table. "These are copies of my publications from the past 5 years. 27 peer-reviewed articles in top educational journals. This one here was published in the Harvard Educational Review and has been cited over 400 times by other researchers." Richardson glanced at the papers dismissively. "Dr. Johnson, we've already reviewed your publications." "Have you?" Vanessa asked. "Because if you had, you would know that this article here presents research conducted at 3 elite private schools very similar to yours. Schools where the administrators initially resisted my recommendations because they assumed their high-achieving students didn't need the interventions I was proposing." Dr. Whitfield looked up with sudden interest. "What kind of interventions?" Vanessa pulled out another document. "Advanced placement participation among minority students increased by 60%. Overall student satisfaction scores improved by 25%. Parent engagement in school activities doubled, and most significantly, college admission rates to Ivy League schools increased by 15%. The administrators were now paying attention in a way they hadn't during the entire interview. "You see," Vanessa continued, "the assumption that elite schools don't need innovative approaches is exactly why many of them are struggling to maintain their competitive edge. The educational landscape is changing rapidly, and schools that rely solely on traditional methods are being left behind." She pulled out a thick report and placed it in front of Richardson. "This is a comprehensive analysis I conducted on private school performance metrics over the past decade. I think you'll find it particularly relevant to prestigious prep's current challenges." Richardson opened the report and began reading. His expression changed as he absorbed the data and analysis. "According to state assessment data," Vanessa explained, "your school's performance has actually declined relative to other elite institutions over the past 3 years. Your college placement rates are still strong, but they're not improving while your competitors are advancing." She moved to another section of the report. "More concerning is the data on student stress levels and mental health indicators. Your students are achieving, but at a cost that's becoming increasingly unsustainable." Dr. Whitfield leaned forward to look at the charts Vanessa was pointing to. "How did you obtain this data?" "It's all publicly available through state education databases," Vanessa replied. "But it requires someone with expertise in educational research to compile and analyze it meaningfully. This is the kind of analysis I provide to every institution I work with." Hampton was now studying the documents intently. "These recommendations at the end of the report, are these based on the interventions you implemented at other schools?" "Some of them," Vanessa confirmed, "but I've tailored them specifically to the challenges facing elite preparatory schools. For example, your advanced placement programs could be expanded to include more interdisciplinary approaches that would better prepare students for college-level critical thinking." She turned to another page. "Your current curriculum, while rigorous, doesn't adequately address the collaborative skills and emotional intelligence that top universities are increasingly prioritizing in their admissions processes." Richardson looked up from the report. "Atto, you're saying our students aren't prepared for college?" "I'm saying they're prepared for the college admissions process," Vanessa clarified, "but not necessarily prepared to thrive once they get there. There's a difference between teaching students to perform well on tests and teaching them to think critically, collaborate effectively, and adapt to new challenges." She pulled out one final document. "This is a proposal I developed specifically for prestigious prep after researching your programs and analyzing your needs. It outlines a 3-year curriculum transformation that would maintain your academic rigor while incorporating the innovative approaches that your competitors are already implementing." The 3 administrators huddled around the proposal, reading in silence for several minutes. Vanessa watched their expressions change as they absorbed the comprehensive nature of her analysis and recommendations. "Dr. Johnson," Richardson said finally, "this is exactly what we need. The board has been pressuring us to develop a long-term strategic plan for academic excellence, and we've been struggling to identify specific areas for improvement. Your analysis of our weaknesses is spot on," Dr. Whitfield admitted. "We've been so focused on maintaining our reputation that we haven't been proactive about staying ahead of educational trends." Hampton looked up from the proposal. "The implementation timeline you've outlined is ambitious but realistic, and the budget projections show that most of these changes would actually save money while improving outcomes." Vanessa remained standing, her briefcase still in hand. "I'm glad you find the analysis useful. I hope it helps you identify the right person for this position." "Dr. Johnson," Richardson said urgently, "we'd like to offer you the position." The words hung in the air as Vanessa processed the complete reversal that had just occurred. 20 minutes earlier, these same people had questioned her credentials and suggested she wasn't qualified to work with their students. "Mr. Richardson," she said carefully, "I'm confused. A few minutes ago, you expressed serious concerns about my background and my fit with your school culture. What has changed?" The three administrators looked at each other uncomfortably. Finally, Richardson spoke. "Dr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. We made assumptions based on our own limited perspectives, and those assumptions were both wrong and inappropriate." Dr. Whitfield nodded in agreement. "Miss, your credentials speak for themselves, and your analysis of our school's needs demonstrates exactly the kind of expertise we need. We were foolish to question your qualifications." "You weren't questioning my qualifications," Vanessa replied firmly. "You were questioning whether someone who looks like me could possibly possess those qualifications. There's a significant difference." The room fell silent again as the administrators grappled with the truth of her statement. "Have you ever faced situations where you had to prove your worth because of prejudices? Share in the comments how you overcame or are overcoming these challenges. Your story can inspire others." Hampton was the first to speak. "Dr. Johnson, you're right. We allowed our preconceptions to cloud our judgment, and that's inexcusable. We pride ourselves on being an institution that values excellence above all else, but we failed to live up to that standard today." "The question is," Vanessa said, "what happens when I encounter parents or board members who have the same preconceptions you just demonstrated? Will you support me then, or will you suggest that I try to be more accommodating to their biases?" Richardson stood up and extended his hand. "Dr. Johnson, if you accept this position, you will have our complete support in implementing your vision for curriculum excellence. Anyone who questions your authority or expertise will be dealing with me personally." Vanessa looked at the extended hand, but didn't take it immediately. "Mr. Richardson, I need to understand something. Are you offering me this position because you genuinely believe I'm the best candidate, or because you're afraid of the legal implications of what just happened in this room?" The directness of her question caught all three administrators off guard. Richardson slowly lowered his hand and sat back down. "Dr. Johnson," he said quietly, "you are absolutely the best candidate we've interviewed. Your credentials are impeccable. Your vision is exactly what we need, and your analysis of our school has provided insights that none of us had considered. If I'm being completely honest, I'm embarrassed by how we began this interview." Dr. Whitfield leaned forward. "Dr. Johnson, I've been in education for 25 years, and I've never seen such a comprehensive understanding of both traditional and innovative approaches to curriculum development. We need your expertise. More than that," Hampton added, "our students need someone who can prepare them for a world that's much more diverse and complex than the bubble we've created here. Your background and perspective would bring a dimension to our programs that we've been missing." Vanessa studied their faces, trying to determine whether this change of heart was genuine or simply a response to being caught in their biases. She thought about her children, about the financial pressures she was facing, and about the opportunity to influence the education of students who would likely become tomorrow's leaders. "If I accept this position," she said finally, "I want to make some things very clear. I will not downplay my qualifications or my achievements to make others comfortable. I will not accept being undermined by parents, board members, or staff who question my authority because of my race. And I will implement changes that I believe are in the best interest of student learning, regardless of how they challenge existing traditions." Richardson nodded emphatically. "Dr. Johnson, that's exactly what we need. Someone with the expertise and the backbone to move this institution forward. And when parents complain that their children are being taught by someone who doesn't look like them or share their background," Vanessa pressed, "then they'll need to find another school," Dr. Whitfield said firmly, "because academic excellence doesn't have a color, and neither does effective leadership." Vanessa finally sat back down, placing her briefcase on the floor. "I want to see your commitment in writing. I want a contract that specifies my authority over curriculum decisions and protects me from retaliation if my leadership style doesn't conform to someone's expectations." "Done," Richardson replied immediately. "What else do you need?" "I want a budget allocation for professional development that will allow me to train your entire faculty in cultural competency and innovative teaching methods. I want the authority to revise admission criteria to ensure we're attracting the most capable students, regardless of their backgrounds. And I want a commitment to diversifying your staff and board over the next 3 years." The three administrators exchanged glances, but nodded in agreement. "Dr. Johnson," Richardson said, "you're asking us to change the culture of this institution." "Yes, I am," Vanessa replied, "because your current culture is limiting your potential for true excellence. You can maintain your high standards while expanding your definition of what leadership and achievement look like." Over the next hour, they negotiated the specific terms of Vanessa's employment, including a salary that reflected her qualifications and the scope of her responsibilities. When they finally shook hands, Vanessa felt a mixture of satisfaction and determination. She had turned a humiliating experience into an opportunity to create the kind of change she had spent her career pursuing. Dr. Vanessa Johnson began her tenure as Director of Curriculum at prestigious Preparatory Academy 6 weeks later. Her first day was marked by curious stares from students and staff who had heard rumors about the new administrator who had somehow managed to impress the notoriously difficult hiring committee. Her first faculty meeting set the tone for everything that would follow. Vanessa presented a comprehensive analysis of the school's strengths and weaknesses, followed by a detailed plan for curriculum enhancement that maintained academic rigor while incorporating innovative teaching methods. "I know that change can be uncomfortable," she told the assembled faculty, "but our students deserve an education that prepares them not just for college admission, but for leadership in an increasingly complex and diverse world." Some faculty members were enthusiastic about her proposals, while others were skeptical. Vanessa had expected resistance and was prepared to address it with patience and evidence-based arguments. The real test came during her first parent meeting, when she presented her vision for curriculum changes to a room full of affluent parents who were accustomed to having significant influence over school policies. "Dr. Johnson," one father said after her presentation, "these interdisciplinary approaches sound interesting, but will they prepare our children for standardized tests and college admissions?" "Mr. Peterson T." Vanessa replied, "The changes I'm proposing will actually improve test scores while developing the critical thinking skills that colleges are increasingly prioritizing. Students who can analyze complex problems from multiple perspectives consistently outperform those who have only been trained for test taking." A mother in the front row raised her hand. "Dr. Johnson, my daughter is already taking 5 advanced placement courses. Are you suggesting that's not sufficient preparation for elite colleges?" Mrs. Chen, I'm suggesting that quantity isn't the same as quality. Colleges want students who can think creatively, collaborate effectively, and adapt to new challenges. Taking more AP courses doesn't necessarily develop those skills. The questions continued for over an hour, with parents probing every aspect of Vanessa's proposals. She answered each question with data, research, and specific examples from her previous work. By the end of the meeting, even the most skeptical parents were asking how quickly the changes could be implemented. The transformation of prestigious preparatory academy began immediately. Vanessa worked with department heads to redesign curricula that maintained rigorous academic standards while incorporating collaborative projects, interdisciplinary learning, and real-world applications. She implemented a mentorship program that paired students with professionals from diverse backgrounds, exposing them to career paths and perspectives they might not have encountered otherwise. She also established partnerships with community organizations that allowed students to apply their learning to actual social challenges. The most significant change was the implementation of a comprehensive diversity and inclusion initiative that addressed not just racial and ethnic diversity, but also socio-economic, geographic, and intellectual diversity. Vanessa worked with the admissions committee to revise criteria that had inadvertently excluded qualified students from non-traditional backgrounds. Within 6 months, the changes were producing measurable results. Student engagement surveys showed significant improvements in motivation and satisfaction. Faculty reported that students were asking more thoughtful questions and demonstrating higher levels of critical thinking. The real validation came when standardized test scores were released at the end of Vanessa's first year. Despite concerns that innovative teaching methods might compromise test performance, scores had actually improved across all subject areas. More importantly, college admission results showed that prestigious prep students were being accepted to elite universities at higher rates than ever before. Admissions officers specifically noted the quality of student essays and the depth of their extracurricular involvement. Dr. Johnson has transformed not just our curriculum, but our entire approach to education, Principal Richardson said at the end-of-year faculty meeting. Our students are better prepared for college and life than they've ever been. The success at prestigious prep brought national attention to Vanessa's work. Education journals published articles about her innovative approaches to elite education, and other private schools began requesting consultations. But the recognition that meant the most to Vanessa came from her students. During graduation ceremonies, senior after senior thanked her for challenging them to think differently and for preparing them to succeed in an increasingly complex world. Dr. Johnson didn't just teach us to get good grades, one valedictorian said in her speech. She taught us to question, to analyze, to understand different perspectives, and to use our education to make a positive impact on the world. 3 years after that humiliating interview, Dr. Vanessa Johnson had not only succeeded in her role, but had fundamentally changed the culture and approach of one of the most prestigious educational institutions in the country. Her work had influenced similar changes at elite schools across the nation. The administrators who had initially questioned her credentials became her strongest advocates. Principal Richardson frequently spoke at educational conferences about the importance of looking beyond traditional expectations when hiring leaders. Dr. Johnson taught us that excellence comes in many forms. He would tell audiences, "Our assumption that leadership had to look a certain way was limiting our potential for true educational innovation." Dr. Whitfield, who had initially questioned whether Vanessa could work with high-achieving students, became a co-author on several of Vanessa's published research papers. "Working with Dr. Johnson has made me a better educator," she would say. "She showed me that my own biases were preventing me from seeing possibilities. The transformation extended beyond academics. The school's board of directors, inspired by Vanessa's success, implemented new policies requiring diversity training for all administrators and establishing specific goals for staff and board diversification. More significantly, the school's culture shifted from one of exclusivity to one of inclusive excellence. Students from diverse backgrounds were actively recruited and supported, and the school's definition of merit expanded beyond traditional measures. 5 years after her hire, Dr. Vanessa Johnson was promoted to assistant superintendent, overseeing curriculum development for multiple elite schools in the region. Her research on innovative education approaches had been published in over 40 peer-reviewed journals, and she had become one of the most sought-after speakers in American education. The impact of her work extended far beyond test scores and college admissions. Students who had been educated under her leadership were entering universities with enhanced critical thinking skills, cultural competency, and a commitment to using their privilege for positive social impact. The students coming from schools where Dr. Johnson has implemented her programs are different, noted Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an admissions dean at Stanford University. They're academically exceptional, but they're also thoughtful, collaborative, and committed to making a difference. That's exactly what we're looking for in tomorrow's leaders. Vanessa's personal life had also stabilized and flourished. The financial security of her position allowed her to provide for her children while pursuing her professional passions. Marcus and Zoe thrived in their schools and frequently spoke about their pride in their mother's accomplishments. "My mom didn't just overcome people's prejudices," Marcus, now in high school, would tell friends. "She used those experiences to become better at helping other people reach their potential." The ripple effects of Vanessa's success continued to expand. Young educators of color began applying to work at schools that had previously been overwhelmingly white, knowing that there were leaders who would support and mentor them. Parents from diverse backgrounds started considering elite private schools as options for their children, confident that their kids would be valued and supported regardless of their backgrounds. Most importantly, a generation of students was being educated to see diversity as a strength rather than a challenge, preparing them to lead in an increasingly interconnected and complex world. Dr. Vanessa Johnson's story became a case study taught in education schools across the country, illustrating both the persistence of bias in educational leadership and the transformative power of inclusive excellence. The woman who had once been told that her impressive credentials seemed too good to be true became living proof that excellence, innovation, and leadership come in many forms. Her success challenged not just the assumptions of 3 administrators in one interview room, but the entire educational establishment's preconceptions about what effective leadership looks like. Today, when young educators face skepticism about their qualifications or their fit with prestigious institutions, Vanessa's story serves as both inspiration and roadmap. She proved that the most effective response to prejudice is not anger or resentment, but excellence so undeniable that it forces systems to change. The interview that was meant to expose her limitations instead revealed the limitations of those who questioned her. The credentials that seemed too impressive for someone who looked like her became the foundation for transforming how elite education approaches teaching, learning, and leadership. Dr. Vanessa Johnson didn't just prove that a black woman could earn a PhD from Harvard and succeed in elite education. She proved that diversity of perspective and experience is essential for true educational excellence, and that the most significant barriers to achievement are often the prejudices of those in positions to recognize and support talent. From a humiliating interview to transformational leadership, her journey demonstrates that when we refuse to accept others' limited expectations, we don't just change our own trajectories, We change entire systems and create opportunities for everyone who follows. The administrators who almost made the biggest mistake of their careers by dismissing her became witnesses to what happens when institutions embrace rather than resist the talents that don't fit their traditional expectations. And thousands of students benefited from an education that was enriched by the very diversity and innovation that those administrators had initially feared would diminish their school's excellence. Dr. Vanessa Johnson's story reminds us that sometimes the most transformational leaders are the ones who don't look like what we expect leadership to look like, but who possess exactly the vision and expertise needed to guide institutions toward their highest potential.